Hello and welcome to Cardinals Off Day. This is the July 31st, 2025 edition, which means it is the trade deadline. We are recording this on the evening of July 30th around 8:30 p.m. Central Time, which means some trade news has broken, but it is highly likely that more trade news will break between when we wrap up this recording and perhaps when you listen to it. So please keep that in mind as you listen. We are frozen in time on the evening of trade deadline eve, and I'm on the one hand sad because my typical partner in crime, Ben Godar, is not able to join me today. I am Ben Humphrey, the traditional co-host of Cardinals Off Day, and I am joined today by a replacement co-host, friend of the pod, and member of the Cardinals Off Day team who handles our social media, interacts with a lot of folks on questions, and just helps us in all kinds of ways with the podcast. Dan Chibnall, pinch hitting tonight for our very special trade deadline episode. Ben, or here, look, I've already called you Ben. Dan, thanks for joining me tonight to talk about the trade deadline. How are things going with you?
Oh, going great, Ben. And no problem. I figured that was going to happen. You and Godar have done over 100 episodes together, so I figure you're probably going to call me Ben a few times during this. But yeah, I'm Dan Chibnall. I help out with the podcast behind the scenes. If you've posted or if you've said something to us on social media, it's probably me who's responded to you or asked you a question. The way I like to think of it is if a post from our account is uh, random and bizarre, it's probably me. If it's like pithy and cutting, it's probably Godar. So that's how you know who's posting from the Cardinals Off Day Blue Sky account. So I cannot
You.
fill. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say you do. Each of you has a distinct social media voice on the Cardinals Off Day account. I steer clear of that. I don't have the free time during the workday. I'm not as flexible as you and Ben. I think are
Sure.
uh, uh, during those times. And also, I feel like if we're all doing it's just going to be all over the place. It'll be kind of like multiple personalities, the various voices that would be coming through on the account. But we really appreciate your help. Uh, but I'm going to put you on the spot, Dan. I'm going to let you start us off. What have you learned between the last Cardinals Off Day podcast, or even generally, about the St. Louis Cardinals team in the lead up to this trade deadline?
Yeah, I think that I mean, I think we've said you and Ben have said something similar to this before, but like I don't know, sometimes when I'm watching the team in the evenings, I feel like they have like short-term amnesia because like one game they look like a juggernaut and like they're pitching great and the hitters are hitting everything and they score 8 runs. There's a person on Blue Sky who has this theory that whoever gets to 8 runs first wins. And they just look great. And then the very next night, the Colorado Rockies pull a beer vendor from one of their stands in Coors Field, and he pitches, and the Cardinals get shut out. And it's like they forgot how to play baseball. So there's just this weird inconsistency, and I don't quite understand why that happens. Sometimes, I remember at the beginning of the season when Brant Brown was everybody was lauding Brant Brown, and it's like, oh, they know how to hit. This is fantastic. And we still see that, but then
Yeah.
sometimes the bats just fall silent, and it's not like they're up against some, titan on the mound. They're up against some guy you've never heard of. So yeah, I think I've just learned that this whole runway experiment has been fun. It's been exciting. I'm an optimist, but at the same time, there's just this weird inconsistency.
And it's kind of been there. I feel like a lot through the Marmol years, and it often seems as well that they are unable to capitalize when they come out and they position themselves well. I'm thinking specifically of it's very difficult for a Major League Baseball team to win a 4 game series. But when you win those first 2 games, like they did against the Cubs and they did against the Padres more recently, and you have a chance to make meaningful and significant headway in a head-to-head series, and they just come out and it just seems like they're totally flat. Um, and they have that opportunity, to gain ground or put distance between themselves and another team. It just seems like too often they come out flat, and it doesn't feel like the team rises to the occasion like you would hope that they would. And um, and that inconsistency is a feature of baseball, and I think sometimes we have to be careful not to read too much into it. But this team does seem to be a little bit more up and down lately, more down than up, and sort of the trait that we kind of gave them early on was that they don't give up, they're always fighting back, and even their losses, some of those tough losses early, they were going toe to toe with the team till the end. And it was tough to be too upset about the loss because they did play hard. There was nothing you could really find to criticize them. And then you compare that early season form to the trip through Arizona and Colorado when they are, and then they come back and they seem to kind of be bouncing back, and then they just go flat again against the Padres. And I think it's exactly what you're talking about, how it's kind of like, it's almost like they forgot who they were over the All-Star break or something.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I wonder too how much you chalk it up to, pitchers getting tired,
yeah,
because, I know we we don't have the best rotation in baseball, but Gray and Liberator and Palante have given us some good starts. Even Michaelis had some good starts for a while. I know we rag on him constantly and, deservedly so. But it seemed like, he and Fetty really just fell off a cliff this past month, and which of course led to, Fetty being traded to the Braves. But yeah, you just wonder if it's like if you had more depth in that rotation and guys that could give you more consistent starts, maybe they're hanging tough with the Cubs and Brewers, but instead we're sitting back behind the Reds.
it's also wild because they've had so few pitching injuries. Like normally this type of thing, you can look at it and it's like, well, hey, they lost a starter, they lost a reliever. You're going to have ups and downs when you dig into your organizational depth, because the players you're calling up aren't quite ready, in the way that the guy you lost was ready. And they haven't had that. They've largely had the same guys in the rotation for the whole season. The only changes being, some of those McGreevy spot starts, and now, McGreevy replacing Fetty. Like their removal of a starting pitcher by designating Fetty for assignment was the first time like they didn't choose who started. Like
Right.
or well, even then they chose it. They still haven't had their hand forced by injury, really.
I think I saw today that they expect John King to go on the IL with a oh shoot, some sort of whatever happened to his side the other night.
Yeah.
And I think Jeff Jones posted on Blue Sky that that was the first time we've put a pitcher on the IL this season. And I was like, whoa,
So that would be setting aside, folks, because people are going to be like, they have pitchers on the IL. Well, yeah, like the first opening day,
right, right,
that is when you go on the IL
right.
if you're bringing an injury into opening day. So it would be, yes, there are guys on the major league roster who are on the IL because they had to be put there on opening day, but this is the first time that has happened since that occurred, which is really remarkable. And frankly, when you look at the lack of depth in the system is probably a big part, as much as anything, uh, for being responsible for their terrific, you know, uh, first few months of the season, shall we say. But really, it's more like May and part of June, is because April
Exactly.
wasn't that great either, and July. But
Well, and
so,
it's a good thing too because I'm not trying to like berate the system or anything, but we know that the pitching in the minor leagues is kind of a desert right now. So
yeah,
it's really good that we haven't had a lot of injuries because besides McGreevy and Graceffo as starters, which and I don't how many starts did Graceffo even give us? Like one, two, something like that?
something like that. Yeah.
Beyond them, no one's ready. Quinn Matthews isn't ready. Tink Hence is still hurt, I think. and so nobody else has those innings built up. So if
And
we have a bunch of
Drew
injuries,
Rom hasn't even has been on the IL all year, and then Tech Roby, who you thought maybe might be building up to that, perhaps in September or something like that. He is on the injured list and underwent surgery on his elbow.
yeah,
So he might not even pitch next year.
yeah,
Sounds like they're targeting 2027 for his return. So they're those guys who you thought maybe would be the more of the quadruple A depth guys, and then that next round of potential major league arms. They've had health issues and have really depleted the system, and so they've been fortunate with the health of the major league staff. But those injuries have also, I think, prevented them from maybe being a little bit more aggressive than they might otherwise have been with Fetty, for example. Um,
absolutely.
and so that leads me to is a natural segue, Dan, to what I have learned.
I was just about to ask, Ben.
I figured you were, but I wanted to say, and I had some social media posts about this, but I'm not delusional. I don't think people like follow me religiously or anything. But we often talk about football brain on this podcast and how Major League Baseball is not the NFL and is not NCAA D1 football. Um, but I feel like we had a syndrome that you often see in the football fan base, and it's backup quarterback syndrome, where you think that this guy who isn't playing for your your team at the highest level is better than the guy who isn't playing that well for your team at the highest level. And this most often manifests itself with the backup quarterback. And very rarely do we have a Tom Brady type situation where the backup quarterback comes in and proves to be actually one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of
Or Kurt
the
Warner, the
NFL.
St. Louis Rams. So
Yes, Kurt Warner. That is a much better reference for our St. Louis centered audience. And for me as a UNI graduate, I should really be using Kurt Warner as that example. Um, but I think that folks uh, with Fetty, with Michaelis being so irritating and so ugly when he is bad, and Fetty being so ugly bad, I think that the clamoring for McGreevy was totally uh, understandable. And it got to a point where I was just kind of like, eh, at least if you're gonna call him up and he gets shelled, you're finding something out for next year and the year after that and future seasons. We know that Fetty isn't going to be on the St. Louis Cardinals next year, and we know that he probably shouldn't be on the St. Louis Cardinals right now.
right.
But I feel like expectations maybe got a little carried away with McGreevy's ERA in Memphis, and then he had the start in Colorado, and I did a double take in the sixth inning when he struck a guy out. I was like, "Is that his first strikeout?" And then I went and looked, and I was like, "That is his first strikeout."
His
Because
fastball really only tops out at what, like 93?
yeah, it's definitely like a decade ago fastball. Like it's it just doesn't have those ticks added to it that you would hope to see, like a Lance Lynn had. Um, and so he has a repertoire that isn't that different from Michaelis or Fetty. Fetty has a good changeup and a not great sweeper, and the sweeper just completely and cutter were not good for him this year. And but the larger point I'm getting at is that McGreevy's stuff isn't good enough to give him much of a margin of error. He has to spot that fastball. He has to be fine with it. He cannot get much of the plate with it, and if he gets much of the plate, he's going to give up very hard contact and lots of it. And so he's a similar profile to Michaelis and Fetty and Jake Woodford and yeah, frankly even Steven Matz, although I think his stuff had a little bit more swing and miss to it uh, than these other guys. But he's emblematic of kind of the type of pitcher that the Cardinals have targeted in the late years of the Mozeliak era. And they've made the player development additions, and I think that that has helped across the board. But I'm interested to see if they are able to turn Fetty and Palante into cheap versions of Michaelis and Fetty, and that has value. And but I think folks maybe had outsized expectations for what McGreevy was going to give them. I mean, this is a tryout from a guy who's probably at best the number 5 starter in Major League Baseball, and there are going to be some bad days, and there might be too many bad days, and those might tell us that he doesn't have much of a future in the majors. And I just feel like folks need to adjust their expectations accordingly, because he is one of those draft picks that's a part of the pool of talent in the minors that Ben and I have taken to calling late era, the late Mozeliak era hangover, where they were the way that the entire league, or both leagues, I should say, there's still two leagues, the National League and the American League, are valuing pitching as just and assessing it, was not the way the Cardinals were. And they were behind the curve. And McGreevy is a product of that. And it's going to be difficult for him, uh, to be much more than a back end starter. And it might even be difficult for him to be a back end starter. So I've learned I think we need to adjust our expectations from McGreevy and treat this more as a tryout than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And two things that you said there. One, it's sort of an experiment, right? I mean, this whole season has been an experiment, right? The runway idea. And like you said, at least if he's getting shelled, at least you know what you've got, right? But you don't know that till you put him out there.
Right.
And now you know the result of it, right? And I think too, I think you're right. People do need to tamp down their expectations. And I'm seeing that tonight too with like the way people are reacting to trades across social media that, it's the same kind of thing that there's a part of us as fans that we're analytical, right? We look at what these guys are actually worth, what they can do for our teams. And the fact of the matter is that some of these guys are not superstars. McGreevy is not the next Roger Clemens. But there's always this sort of hope, I think, in the back of a lot of fans' minds of like, hey, this guy's young, this guy's fresh, he's not Eric Fetty, put him out there. And they're really hoping that that will be, sort of the Cardinal Devil magic, that this person will get out there and just start, letting it rip, and boom, we've got a new starter. And the fact is that a lot of the times that simply doesn't happen. But fans don't want to think about that, right? They don't want to think that we just have this sort of, instead of having a huge group of talent down at Memphis, it's sort of a mirage at Memphis. There's not a lot there. So yeah, I agree with you. I try to figure out, why do fans get so, get their hopes up so much? But I think that at their core, it's just part of being a fan. You want every prospect to be good, you want the value to be high.
And I become far too cynical with my old age, where I
You're
feel
younger
like I
than
have
me.
I well, sure, but also, like, growing up in a AAA town, you talk yourself into believing, hey, this guy could be something, with a lot of guys on opposing teams, and even for the Iowa Cubs, and uh, more and more I find myself believing the shortcomings are more of a problem than the potential is a solution.
Right.
And it's the guys who throw hard, like who was it? Like Michael Clato. Do you remember when they got him?
Oh
And it
yeah.
was just like
Yep.
any scout who saw him, you can just wish on so much.
Hmm.
Like, there's so much potential there, but he doesn't really know where the ball is going.
No.
And back then I was like, man, if he can just harness that control, he's really going to be something.
That,
Well, how
yeah.
many guys do that? Not many.
No.
And here it is, where it's like we're in the strikeout era, and McGreevy doesn't strike guys out. He also doesn't walk guys. And I'm not saying he's going to be necessarily going to be bad, but it is going to. And guys hit a lot more home runs now. That's what they try to do. it's going to be harder for him to succeed in this league than 10, 20 years ago when guys were still trying to hit singles
Yep.
and doubles and we're going to, play the contact game with him. And so he's got an uphill battle, and uh, I'm I'm pulling for him, of course, because it would be good for the Cardinals and more enjoyable for us as fans if he turns out to be something useful. But I think most importantly, Dan, like if Palante and McGreevy are Michaelis and Fetty like 2.0, you know, uh, that's fine because that's what DeWallet ball was originally supposed to be. It's
Yep.
supposed to be we're not going to pay $18 million for Miles Michaelis types. We're going to grow those and pay them $800,000.
And then
And
and then trade them in like their second ARB year or whatever before
yes,
they become a free agent. So,
yep, yep. Uh, and and you're never going to pay that premium, but you're going to get 6, 7 years out of them potentially. And that has a whole lot of value because it frees up resources to go invest in other places on your roster. And, whether that be signing your high level homegrown talent to extensions or partaking in the free agent market. So we should all definitely be pulling for them, but we should also recognize that even if they aren't an ace, that's not necessarily a failure because I don't think that either one of them profiles with an upside of much more than a 3 and frankly probably a 4
yep.
starter.
Not everybody's going to be an ace. Not everybody's going to be throwing smoke. Yeah.
So uh, I just think now the backup quarterback is in the game, and we all got a pretty sobering dose of reality in his last start, and hopefully he's able to adjust because that's also the other thing is after those ugly starts for young players, it's really important to look at what they're doing the next game and the game after that and the game after that to see if they have learned and have shown that they can make adjustments. Because that's player development never ends. When you're in the majors, you have to constantly retool and make adjustments to what your competition is doing to try to beat you. And that's the game within the game, and that's what these young players have to learn to be successful at in order to have a successful big league career. And we're all pulling for McGreevy and the other young Cardinals to do that, but I think that we need to, be clear-eyed while we watch them do
Well said.
that. So the Fetty trade, how surprised were you, Dan, that someone traded for him?
I think it was because so they DFA'd him, and then I remembered that you can trade a guy within what like 7 days after DFAing him, and I thought, well, I'm kind of my baseball brain is a bit goofy, so in my head I'm like, okay, so we can trade him to like I don't know Kansas City for like a freezer full of Totino's pizza rolls or something, It's like who's gonna take a flyer on this guy? Like no contender is like they don't want him out there getting shelled every fifth day. Nobody wants to work on him as a project if they're trying to make the playoffs. So who's going to take him? And then when I saw it was Atlanta, and then they also picked up who was it? Oh, Carlos Carrasco as well. And I'm like, what is Alex Anthopoulos doing? Is he assembling like a museum of failed starters? Or is this like some project for next year? And he thinks that his pitching people are going to be able to like fix these guys. So I was actually kind of surprised they found somebody, but at the same time, it's a player to be named later or cash considerations. So who knows? We might still be getting those Totino's pizza rolls from Atlanta.
The thing that was interesting to me is Atlanta feels like they just made the the uh, the similar trades to what the Cardinals made when they went out and got Lester and Happ at the trade deadline, where they're
Hmm.
just like, we just need guys to give us innings
Yeah,
because we've just been decimated, and that wound up, you know, far exceeding anyone's expectations, of course.
right.
And I'm not saying that's going to happen with Atlanta, but they're in a very similar position. Also, kind of reminded me of the 2006 Cardinals, where it's you know grabbing like Weaver and,
Weaver. Yeah.
like, hey, we are so desperate, you know, we're gonna pick you up and see if
But that worked out just
yeah,
tremendous.
and that worked out well too. So
Although that'd be pretty hilarious if suddenly Fetty found, he just unlocked something and then here come. Although I did see Acuna's hurt again, so I think Atlanta's
yeah.
they're toast for the rest of the season. But that's a good point, what you said about eating innings, because somebody's got to get out there and pitch, and they've had a lot of injuries. So
And you also, I know people tend to be like, well, what about everyone you have in AAA? And it's like, well, there's a natural ascension to the
yeah,
majors, and there's also a natural increase to workloads and all those types of things. And you don't want to bring someone up to the majors before they are ready because you can really cause damage to their development. And you
exactly
also you don't want to overwork them just because you have
right.
to have someone throw the innings. You would rather get some of these veterans to absorb some of that so that you can allow those younger players to continue to develop.
I think that, and I try not to assume too much about what other fans think about these things, but from what I read and what I listen to and from what I see online, yeah, it seems like people kind of forget that these players aren't plug and play. Like you can't just, it's not like a socket wrench where you just pull a new little socket out, like put that on your wrench and go to town. It's like, no, these are people who aren't ready to pitch in the major leagues. They might be able to give you a few innings, but they're not just, you can't just plug and play. So yeah, like we said earlier, we don't have too many people at Memphis to help us out. Atlanta's probably in a similar situation. Those guys aren't ready.
And I was kind of interested to see if the Cardinals tried to get some starting pitching that might or relief pitching that might be a little bit closer to the majors to get that tryout this year. Some
Yeah.
some guys who are just about big league ready.
Well, and we might see
Um,
that, tomorrow, because like I anticipate, I think we're still going to see guys like Romero and Maton and Mats. Like teams are always clamoring for relief
yeah.
pitching at the deadline. So who knows what kind of stuff we get in return for that. But yeah, there could be some tryouts or runway potential there too.
But we do have one trade that broke right before we came on the air, and that trade was um, with the Mets, and the Cardinals sent a player who I greatly enjoy, in Ryan Helsley, um, out to the Mets, and in return they got some prospects, and I'm going to do my best to pronounce everyone's name correctly. Jesus Baez. He's a shortstop, ostensibly. Um, and Nate Dome and Frank Ellisald, both right-handed pitchers. And I thought that I was coming in with pretty grounded expectations. Ryan Helsley is at the end of club control, which means he's going to be a free agent. He is the only free agent to be that the Cardinals have who could conceivably receive a qualifying offer, which means what the Cardinals get in return for him via trade, in their estimation, is more valuable to them than that pick. If they make the qualifying offer, he rejects it and then signs somewhere else. They would get a draft pick for him doing that. And so the fact that they got three players, I assumed that they would get three plus players. But I read a lot of the prospect stuff in the preseason, and my initial reaction is I don't even remember these guys as being interesting. And some of them aren't even ranked by all of the various services. The pitchers aren't. And Baez, he plays shortstop now, and the scouting reports were actually more negative than you usually see for a guy who they think is going to move off shortstop. And it's like he has no range, and his first step is so slow he probably can't even play third base. But he's listed like as a shortstop third baseman. So he's probably a second baseman. And, he's a second baseman with good contact ability and gap power. Oh, what a surprise. A hitter with good contact ability and gap power acquired by the St. Louis Cardinals. But what surprised me is like it sounds like he's almost pigeonholed at second base, and it just kind of makes me think like this is the highest like consensus, highest rated prospect that they got in return, and I was pretty underwhelmed by that. And the pitchers don't feel really that interesting to me either. Like just nothing really jumps out about like this is a pitch that you can project them on.
Right.
So
And
these feel like almost like player dev choices where like we can turn these guys into something,
yep.
and it feels real project heavy for a return for a bona fide closer from a team that has World Series ambitions.
Right. And I think too, that deal came mere minutes after the Phillies had acquired Johan Duran from the Twins, and people were blown away because the Twins got the Phillies' fourth and sixth top prospects back in the deal. But the thing was, is like Duran is under team control until the end of 27, so you have to pay, you have to pay more for that. Whereas Helsley is just a 2 month rental. But yeah, you're right. Like when I first saw it, I was like, okay, so these get Baez is the eighth in the Mets system. He's the eighth best prospect. Dome is the 14th, and then the third guy whose name escapes me at the moment, he's not even in the top 30. So I think you're right, Ben, that there's probably these are player development choices. They see something that they can mold or craft or something like that, and then hope for in the future. Um, but again, at the same time, this resurrects the whole thing that people have been talking about all season of, what could we have gotten if we had traded Helsley over the offseason?
Yes.
And his value was I would argue, the highest it's ever been in his career. I mean, he's coming off what a 50 save season. His, four seamer was untouchable. And it's like to me, he was only going to regress or get injured this season. And we saw his four seamer get lit up this season. So he went to I saw a graph today that showed how he started using his four seamer less and less and less because he was
Yep.
getting lit up on it and using his slider more.
Yep.
If that ends up, working for the Mets, great. And I also want to say too, like you mentioned when you first noted the trade, I'm going to miss Ryan Helsley a lot. Being a baseball fan, I always remember it's a business. But man, oh man, that guy was fun. He was so
Yes.
much fun to watch pitch. His entrance, just watching him blow guys away. I loved whenever in interviews he would talk about, his Native American heritage, back in 2019 when he took it to the Braves, for doing the
Yeah.
chop. I'll never forget that. So I love the guy, and I wish him well, and I'll miss him. But I'm also of the Godar school of thought that you can always rebuild a bullpen. It just takes time. So, but yeah, you're right. I think these are probably player development picks.
And there's been a lot of chatter throughout the year with the strange, for Major League Baseball, strange transition plan the Cardinals have put in place, even though almost every other organization on earth would have a similar, um, uh, you know, type of transition plan where, you're allowing a handoff to occur. Um, between Mozeliak and Bloom, with Mozeliak making a point of being like, I am making the decisions in my final year, but Bloom will have input if it affects the future. Well, all of these draft picks are years away
Hmm.
from the majors.
We should note that I think Baez and Dome are both at the Mets high A, and I don't recall where the third pitcher is at this point. So
Um,
the MLB.com prospect site noted the expected year of arrival in the majors for both Dome and Baez was 2027. So
and that seems optimistic. Like I guess maybe like later in the year. That seems a little optimistic to me.
right. And bear in
Like
mind too, this was within the Mets system, so who knows how
oh
that
sure,
slots in with
yeah,
ours.
yeah.
So
Um, but like this isn't even these aren't even 2026 trades. It is what that point drives home. And
right.
so, before anyone is like, "Oh, Mosaic is an idiot," I'm here to tell you that if you want to fire your arrows, shoot your arrows, fire them at Bloom. as much as Mosaic because this was a team effort. This wasn't John Mozeliak, just going out there making the decision unilaterally. These are guys who they like something about and they think can be something. And it sounds like maybe in 2027, we'll find out if that is correct.
We'll see. Yeah.
Um,
I had a
but
I had a friend text me and he's like, "So is this guy going to replace Arenado?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 no. Like this is years away."
this guy uh, is going to back up Weatherholt, um,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
something like that. Like Brendan Donovan will be gone when he's on the Cardinals.
Right.
Uh,
Brendan Donovan will be retired. Yes.
so it's I was expecting the return to be slightly underwhelming. But when I reflect back on the 2023 deadline, like I thought they would do this year what they did there, where they seemed to get guys who had more upside or were immediate depth pieces. And this is totally not that. This is, it feels like little bit more of a scratch ticket approach where perhaps they chose to get three players instead of with potential upside than maybe like one or two players who are surer bets
Right.
um, with this trade. That appears to be, to me, just looking at it, what they did. And we aren't going to know. It's just like the draft, like,
Right.
hey, we'll know in a few years if this was any good. Um,
Unless you find, the that ultimate diamond, somebody like a Skeens, or for
yeah,
us, I mean, you could argue Weatherholt has been
yes,
incredible so far. I mean,
yeah,
in my time as
Weatherholt's
a Cardinals fan, I can't recall the last time I saw a prospect move this rapidly through the system and produce at every level almost immediately.
Albert Pujols, maybe.
Albert Pujols, yeah. Who
Seems
was
like
drafted in
the
like the billionth round, right?
right,
Yeah.
right.
Out of some community college in like Kansas City. So yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Um, so it'll
So
be interesting, but color me. I will be frank. I'm a little bit lukewarm on it. What's
now,
what's your
note
take,
here,
Dan?
folks, you heard it on Cardinals Off Day podcast first that Ben Humphrey is doubtful of Jesus Baez, who is apparently going to be the next Albert Pujols. So, you'll have to eat crow one day, Ben, when that
I
happens.
hope I do. I will gladly be wrong. But I'm not. I can usually talk myself into or see what they're going for uh, with trades and draft picks.
Right.
Um, and I'm usually like, okay, like I can see what you're doing here. And these particular picks seem like they're maybe a little bit more raw material
Mhm.
uh, prospects to target uh, when you're making a trade than frankly, what the Cardinals typically do. It's usually more of a polish, and you can see, oh, they're banking on this.
Yep.
And that frankly, they're probably banking on improving Baez's defense and helping him develop a little bit more pop. And he's a useful big leaguer.
Yep. And I think too that, fans have to remember that, everybody knows that Bloom's coming in, but it's not going to be business as usual. We haven't had a
Yeah,
transition like this since Jocketty to Mozeliak, right? And that's been
yeah,
over 20 years, right? So, things are going to be different. We're going to probably make deals with different teams or maybe trade more often, or we're going to pick up guys that fans are like, who's this guy?
yep.
So I think that we just have to remember that with this transition, there's going to be a lot of like unknown territory or unfamiliar territory. Yeah.
All right. So let's move to our listener questions. Thank you, everyone who submitted questions. You can do that on the Cardinals Discord. You can do it on Blue Sky. Um, we're going to start with Frank Castle on Blue Sky. He asks, I know they won't, but could you talk about what a Contreras trade would look like as far as return value? And maybe next season, Burley and Herrera are at first base primarily. What do you think, Dan?
That's tricky. Well, because one, I don't know if, Contreras really wants to go anywhere. I feel like he's pretty comfortable, with the Cardinals, and he's been really relishing his position change. And so one, I think it would be hard to pry him out of there to say like, hey, we're gonna, trade you.
And he has the no trade clause
Exactly. Yeah,
as well.
they have to ask him first to, to do it. And I don't know if he would do it. He just seems to be enjoying himself too much.
Well,
And
there was reporting in the offseason that they asked him, and he was like, "No, I want to stay." And
right.
there's reporting again indicating that he pretty much was like, "No, I don't want to leave."
Yeah. In
And
fact, I thought I saw something where he said like I've won a World Series ring. I'm comfortable where I am. And it's like, okay, and that's cool. I like Contreras a lot. I think he's a fun player. I like his level of excitement. Whether, what we would get in return, I mean, he has what, 2 years left on his contract. He's in his early 30s, I think, now. I mean, he's still producing at the plate. Um, but yeah, I don't know what you would get in return for a Wilson Contreras. It would have to be somebody looking for a, first base bat that's, not necessarily going to mash, 40 home runs for you. But I mean, you might be able to get a prospect or two, for somebody like Wilson Contreras. But again, I think the chances of something like that happening are pretty low.
I think you're probably looking at with what the team their apparent approach is. I think you're looking at probably 3 to 4 prospects, and they're probably all below Double A. And there's probably a little bit more raw tools there than uh, than the Helsley return because there's more control, but also there's a higher financial commitment. So that's another factor to consider is what are the Cardinals eating in salary, if anything?
Right,
If they're eating more, they're going to be able to get more. If they're just getting rid of salary, they're going to get less.
right.
Um, but I think that this is a moot question because it sounds like Contreras isn't interested in leaving. And Ben and I discussed on the last episode, as you'll probably recall, Dan, that Wilson Contreras is a legitimate pro athlete psychopath,
Oh yeah,
and
that's one of the things I
and
love
so
about him.
but what's my favorite thing about him too? It's why he's one of the players I most enjoy on the team. Um, but also, I wonder if he will change his tune after Mozeliak, Michaelis, and Marmol are gone. Like,
You know,
or does he want to stay and be on a winner after those guys leave
things can
to
change in
leave
a New
his
York
mark?
minute, so you never
Yeah.
know. But I think some players just crave stability, and I think he might be one of them.
And there's nothing more destabilizing than an in-season trade. Like you don't even
Right.
have a house, like someone you don't even get to pack your own belongings. Like they come and pack your stuff up and you take, literally like an overnight bag and you have to go join your next team. Like all of the stories you hear about trade deadline, what it's like to be traded, it sounds really horrible. And then you just have to go like do your job like, you
Yeah,
haven't just been traded and you have to live out of like a hotel all the time.
yeah. Like
Like,
I
not even
thought of
just
that
on a road
tonight.
trip.
I thought of
Yeah.
that tonight about Helsley because his wife, lives and works in St. Louis, and so now they're
Yeah.
going to be separated by, thousands of miles. So that's not easy. And then all the
No.
stress of meeting new teammates and having to, win over fans in this new role, and it's high leverage, and yeah, that's a lot. Yeah,
And in Helsley's case, in New York City, of all places,
in New York
where
City, in
not
Queens.
very forgiving media environment there, and the fans
And
are
if he
can be a
doesn't do
little bit
well,
harsh.
Grimace is going to come out and eat him. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Uh,
I don't think that the players without positional flexibility, like bats at first base, tend not to bring a lot back nowadays.
right.
Um, and I think that Contreras still has, his StatCast metrics are high quality enough that I think he's appealing. Um, and but even that being said, like the position he plays and his profile as a hitter, uh, and even though he has made significant Im- uh, significant improvement in preparing for and becoming a first baseman from some of the early stuff, it's still I just I don't think it's going to be all that much, and I think it's going to be a little bit underwhelming. But I do understand why fans would be curious and why the organization would want to explore it because he's probably not going to be around the next time the Cardinals are competing for the postseason, in all honesty. So if you
Agreed.
can get something to him, allow him to go be on a competitor if that's what he wants, you should probably explore that.
All right. Our next question is from John on Blue Sky, who goes by the handle Firecracker. Is there an arm in the majors that is untouchable at this point, except maybe McGreevy? Obviously, Gray and Michaelis have no trade clauses, but anybody else is fair game now, right? What do you think of that, Ben?
No, I don't think Libertor is. I think he's the best. I mean, he's the best. Like for the next 3 years, he's the best pitcher in
Hmm.
the organization for them, based on what he's done this year and his pedigree. So I think Libertor is untouchable. He's also, he's still fairly cheap. Um, I think Palante probably is just because McGreevy I think is touchable. First of
Hmm.
all, I disagree with the premise. I think Palante has better stuff, even though he still does not get swings and misses. The
Right.
quality of contact last year is kind of his ideal um, for what if things break right, he can maybe have like a number three starter season. I don't think he's that true talent wise. Um, but they're both, Palante is still quite cheap as well. So I think when you're looking at this, given what's happened with the cable rights deal, given the fall off in attendance, and then also given the lack of high level minor league pitching that can come in and fill the gaps, while I think McGreevy is touchable, I think that Libertor, Palante, and McGreevy, they check so many boxes, both on the business side and the baseball side, that it would be hard for them to move any of those guys because they need them next year. Like they need guys to pitch.
They need to eat
And
those innings, right? Yeah.
yeah, so I that's what I would say. And other than that, um, I think you listen on any reliever. I think you listen on all the
Oh, for
time,
sure. Yeah.
always
I
and
mean,
forever.
yeah,
Uh,
I mean, you can always, I mean, because think about it, like you don't, I know we drafted a reliever this year, like what was it in the second round or whatever, but so many teams you never draft relievers because relievers are basically guys who just don't start anymore, right? And
yeah.
so whenever like we're losing Helsley, yes, that's terrible. He's with the team for a long time, great player. But the thing is we've done this so many times as a team of just rebuilding a bullpen and guys emerge as middle innings guys and setup guys and closers, right? Like, yeah, there's always going to be guys to fill those roles. So, yeah. So I don't worry when we lose relief pitching because you can always find new guys. It just takes a little time.
Um, and and as John points out, the no trade clauses, those they handcuff you. You're not going to be able to
Right.
uh, trade those guys unless they agree. So uh, I think that they've got probably four guys for next year, and that has to have them feeling good um, going into the offseason. DeWallet Inspector asks, much talk of what the Cards should do at the deadline. Sell, buy. Okay, maybe that's no longer a debate. And I think the Helsley trade cements that. It's no
Yes.
longer a debate. They'll probably only move free agents to be free agent to be relief pitchers for down list prospects and little else. I don't think anyone should expect a much different team in 2026 in terms of results. That said, what player would you guys trade that would otherwise seem to be unavailable, but one that might have a real shot to change the trajectory of the Cardinals as they head into Heim time?
Well, I have my answer to this.
All right.
So bear in mind this is an experiment, folks. This is just a little arguendo. I'm not actually advocating for this, but OT Lee here, Dualid Inspector, puts us into this scenario. I would say Ivan Herrera. And my reason would be that, he's obviously teams would be interested in him because he's shown a lot of pop in his bat, but the man is positionless. Like, I still don't know what we're going to do with him. Like, he's simply not a great catcher. First base is blocked. He can't play any other infield positions, and he just started playing left field for the first time since he was 14 years old. So, you know, in the sense to answer Dewalt Inspector's question, if you were gonna send somebody away that everybody really loves and like, oh, that guy's untouchable, he might be the one. You might be able to get something interesting for him in return. I don't know, but that would be my answer.
Um, Mine would be I would say that's very interesting. I don't think they'll do that because he's still so cheap.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
Like that's why you don't do it because
exactly. Yeah,
he's
I
just
don't. I don't think
you
that's
know.
likely at all, unless some team somehow was like, "I'll give you these amazing prospects," and we're like, "Yeah, sold," But that's not going to happen.
Um, and John Denton kind of got the ball rolling on this, although in the Cardinals off day group text thread, I think I've been talking about this for weeks. um, that the Cardinals need to trade Brendan Donovan, and they
I
need
knew
to
you were
trade
going to bring
him,
this up, so I'm excited to hear what our listeners think of your idea here.
and they need to do it tomorrow or today. Actually, today is the off day. It's July 31st for our listeners. It's July 30th for us. They need to do it today, and if they don't do it today, they need to do it at the winter meetings because uh, Donovan. He's 28. He's got like a 328 batting average on balls in play this year, which is fueling his career best, like 125 weighted runs created plus, which is very good. Don't get me wrong, but it's not superstar level, and he plays satisfactory defense at multiple positions, which again is good, but it's not. He's no Tommy Edman in the field, right? And so he is in his age 28 season. He has had one. He's ARB one this year. He's going to be in his second year of arbitration, then in his third year of arbitration. So he has 2 years of control. He's going to be 30 at the end of that control, and he's a contact hitter with minimal pop. Like it's not bad. It's not good. He's a doubles hitter, right? Like
Mhm.
he's the quintessential doubles hitter.
Yep.
Sometimes one finds its way out of the yard. The Cardinals are the fourth best team in the NL Central right
Yep.
now,
Yep.
right? Like
We're
only
not
better
going to
than
make the
the Pittsburgh
playoffs.
Pirates, right?
Yeah, with this rotation, there's no way we make the playoffs.
So if and I don't look at them and I don't see a rotation that makes the playoffs during Donovan's control years. Um, and I also don't know, you look at how many guys who you sign past age 30 do you look back on and think, that was a good contract.
Right. Well, like you
Like
and I,
even
oh, we talked about this a little bit on Blue Sky too, but name a Cardinal that the team has gone to arbitration with, and then we signed to a contract before they entered free agency or as they entered free agency. The list in the Mosaic era is zero. We've never done that.
right. And so it'd be a change of pace with Bloom. Like the most they've done is they've gotten cost certainty, usually with like a 2 year deal with the same salary each year or something close, right? And then they deal them away. And so, right now, Brendan Donovan's an all-star. He has multi-position flexibility. Like a team like the Yankees, he would be very valuable to. And really any team he would be because he's a very good player. But if you have boppers in the middle of that lineup and you can plug Donovan in, sixth, or even lead off. But if you're like set second through fourth or fifth in that lineup and you can plug him in as a complementary player, like that's a very, very nice player to have. And he is at the height of his value right now. He has also had health issues. This is really the first year where we've gotten like him as an everyday player staying healthy as well. And I understand that he has emerged as a leader in the clubhouse. He seems like a really good guy. I like Brendan Donovan a lot. He's my wife's favorite player.
Same.
Um, and uh, but all of those things, and I like watching him play. I like guys who don't strike out a lot, who have good bat to ball skills. I like doubles hitters. I like watching them play. Uh, but he's not a core player, in my opinion. And even if he were, he's not going to be a core player on the next competitive Cardinals team. And so I think that it is incumbent on Bloom to see what they can get for him. And maybe they do get blown away at the trade deadline, as the trade deadline nears in season. But even if they don't, I think that they need to not repeat the Helsley mistake and
I
get rid of him
I was
when his
just about to
value is
say it.
maximized.
Yep.
Yeah.
When
So
you got to
that's why
think
I
about
think it's
value, right?
Donovan.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And
Uh,
so and I think his values most. He has positional flexibility for a contender down the pennant race home stretch, and then you can also plug him in for 2 more years if
mhm.
your plan is still to compete, and he is cost control. And so I look at that as a very valuable piece.
Agreed. And I think you make a very well-reasoned argument. Of course, there's the emotional fan, and we both have that part of ourselves as well, who will be like, no, we can't trade Brendan Donovan. So just a reminder, folks, if you really love Ivan Herrera and Brendan Donovan, Ben and I are both on Blue Sky, so you can yell at us tomorrow when this drops.
Yes, absolutely. And I would also even throw Burleson in to that mix for kind of a combination of the two players we just talked about.
Right.
Burleson doesn't really have a position,
Yep.
and he's getting up there in age, and I just kind of feel like you need to see what you can get. But I don't know if he's a difference maker because of his positional inflexibility and age.
Right. Exactly. And since we've already given the listeners a glimpse into the Cardinals off day text thread, you should also know, listeners, that whenever Burleson makes a questionable play in the outfield, you will hear a comment from Ben Humphrey in that text thread.
I like to use the verb saunter uh, to describe his approach to chasing down balls in the gap or in the corner. Um,
Um,
I know he's not as bad as he makes me feel when he has to run a long distance for a ball. I
yeah.
understand that, but that doesn't mean I miss an opportunity to make a comment when I
Of
see
course. Next question, moving on to a roster question, and this was one that comes up from time to time. Does Yohel pose? This is from Cole Morris. Cole is sends us questions regularly. Does Yohel Pozo need to replace Pedro Pajes as our primary catcher? Now I know that the baseball writer Dane Perry on Blue Sky is a big Pozo fan. He's a Pozo bozo, and he would say yes to this. But Ben Humphrey, what do you say?
it. Pozo has had a good run early in the year, and I love Pozo. My family loves Pozo. We saw Pozo have a game-winning hit in extra innings, a walk-off hit. Um, and he's so round in his midsection that uh, he makes me happy when he's on the field. Um, but I'm not. I don't know if I 100% believe that total package Pozo is that much better than Pajes to replace him. But Pajes is also like in the Siani zone. Like his bat
Mhm.
is just just is bad.
Yeah, I think
Um,
isn't his WRC plus like 69 right now?
he dipped below. I have not looked in a couple of days, but he dipped below 60 a few days ago. Because I did look and I was just like, yikes, that's even worse than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Um, and weighted runs created plus is based on the value of overall your batting line. 100 is average. Every percentage point below 100 is a point below average. And so if you're below 70, your bat is fringy. If you're like below 65, it's very, very bad. if you're dipping below 60, you're probably not long for the major leagues, unless you are a backup catcher. and and I feel like what the Cardinals have is a situation where they have uh, they have two backup catchers, and I think Pozo probably needs more playing time, but I don't know if he should get like 60% of it. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
if it's around 50-50, I'm just not going to quibble with it because I don't think either one is that much better than the other to have that strong of an opinion about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I like both of them a lot, and I like Pozo for a lot of the same reasons you do. It's sort of like he's like a character on a show that shows up every third episode, and you're like, yes, here he comes,
Yeah,
like he'll
Pozo's
do
here.
something fun. And but Pages is sort of he's the consistent guy. He's the guy who's there every day, right? And he's kind of the rock behind the plate. And I know that there's a lot of intangibles with like calling a game, quote unquote, and having a feel for the pitchers, quote unquote, and that stuff is very hard to like, quantify. But it seems to me like the pitchers do very well with Pages back there. I don't know if I have you know, enough of a sample to see how well they're doing with Pozo back there. I don't know. I mean, none of our catchers really throw that well. I mean, but that's because we've had Yadier Molina for 2 decades. So I don't know. I mean, since we're kind of, we're selling at the deadline, you might as well give Pozo a few more tries behind the plate or have him play first, once every 2 weeks or something, which I think they did recently. But honestly, I mean, I love the guy, but I think if it were me, I would still choose Pages over Pozo.
And Pahe seems like a really nice guy as well.
Oh
And it was
yeah,
very endearing when his family came to see him at Wrigley and they had
absolutely.
nature Cardinal shirts that they bought like at some store instead of St. Louis Cardinal
Yep.
official merch, uh, or apparel, whatever they're calling it nowadays.
One of my favorite Pages stories was a kid asked him why he wears number 43, and he said, and this is the most like mathematical thing I've heard a player say in a long time. He said, "Well, when I came to St. Louis, I wanted 17 because that's what I always wear, but 17 is retired, so I took 43 because 4 minus 3 is 1, and 4 plus 3 is 7." And that's
I
why he wears 43, everybody.
Yeah, that's very endearing. Um, and uh, and then Sonny Gray, had him come and do the post game interview
That
after
was
that
awesome, right?
Maddox. And how
Yeah,
often do you see that? And so, like, very clearly, the pitchers do like him, and I'm not someone to poo-poo that totally. Like, I think that's a very important component of a catcher's game. So, all this is to say, I think Pozo should play more, but I'm not so strong in that belief that in my belief about Pozo's skill that I think he should totally supplant Pies.
agreed.
Um, Grant on Blue Sky asks, if I wrote a Cardinals blog, I'd 100% research and write about this premise. Imagine Mo had the awareness and foresight that Jocketty had for trading guys at their peak value. Bought and Field for Edmonds, Bud Smith and Polanco for Roland, etc. Now consider the guys Mo held on to way too long.
So it's less of a question and more of a guiding statement for us.
Yes, we can all now think about this. No, I understand what uh, Grant is getting at. What I would say to that is I think that absence makes the heart grow fonder, and we
Hmm.
all get a little nostalgic for the great teams that Jocketty put together. Um, you know, I I think that there are examples of players that the Jocketty era Cardinals probably held on to a little bit too long. Like maybe Gary Gaetti. I mean, I'm joking, but it was also a different era where there weren't long-term contracts, and that's really what I'm getting at. Is the 5-year contract was like a super long contract back then. And it was the 2 or 3 year contracts were much more common. Jocketty signed Pujols to, I think, the largest contract in team history at that point in time. And, they bought out his ARB years and got additional years. And what was that? When was that? Was it like 7 year, like a 7 or 8 year contract, if I
I think it was
remember
8.
correctly?
Yeah.
I think it was 8. I think you're right. So even like that type of contract, which was almost unheard of, um, he, uh, he was on that was sort of the tip of the spear on that type of baseball contract. But you can also look at it. He held on to Jim Edmonds too long,
Right.
right? Like he probably uh, held on to Matt Morris too long. He probably held on to Jeff Suppan too long. I, these are guys who at the end were nowhere near uh, what they were at the beginning of their time with the Cardinals. You could even make the argument about Rolen, although I think that's trickier because Rolen kind of had the valley and then rose back up with Toronto and with the Reds. And so, there are. It's easy, but to make this criticism because the Mosaic stuff is fresh in your mind. But then you
Precise.
also have to, keep in mind like Mosaic cut bait on Mike Leake. He traded
Right.
away Dexter Fowler instead of holding on to him. Like
That's why I
uh
think it's important to sort of to look at these things in their whole context. Like you said, we tend to think of one, hindsight is 2020, right? And then two, we don't tend to think about, the moves that just sort of pass, that they're gone through the wisp and fog of time, right? But if you sat down and really mapped this stuff out and like made a list, I think that you might come to a slightly different conclusion.
yeah, like Colby Rasmus.
Right,
Did they
exactly.
did they trade him at hit the peak of his value? Yes. And then they won the World Series that
Right.
year in large
Yeah.
part, or in no small part, I should
So
say,
I,
to the
yeah, I think
players
you have
they
to be
added.
careful about like cherry picking some of this stuff. And I think too that, you have to really think about at the end of the day, like for example, Mo told us at Blogger Day back in June that somebody asked him what's the one deal you regretted the most, and he immediately said the Ozuna deal. Marcelo Ozuna, because we gave up Zach Gallen and Sandy Alcantara. Um, and he knows that, and he doesn't try to ignore it or come up with some kind of excuses. He's just like, yeah, we didn't see the value in these guys, just like other teams did, and we and we're facing the consequences because of it. So at least there's that. It's not like they're trying to hide some of these things, but yeah. Anyway,
That doesn't make the Marcelo Zuna trade any easier to swallow.
no, it doesn't. Yeah,
Yeah,
my favorite
even
part of
he
that
admits it's bad, right?
My
Like,
favorite part of that was when Mo said, "I've lost sleep thinking about that before," and one of the fans said, without skipping a beat, "So have we."
um, but I think this is more like directed at maybe even Fetty, who or Michaelis or Matt Carpenter. Those seem to be the recent ones that people have targeted. But the other thing that I think is important for folks to appreciate is um, this is a business, yes, but it's not, like your fantasy league where you can just cycle through people and it's just names
Right,
on a screen,
right.
right? And you get their numbers. And if you have more uh, players with better numbers, you win.
Hmm.
If you have more players with better numbers, you typically win in baseball too. But you also have people who become free agents and make a decision on where they want typically to end their career. Because we've talked about the length of contracts. Now, a lot of free agent contracts are the last ones that a player will probably sign. Um, and so you have to be careful in when your pool of players is very seniority minded in terms of respect, all of those types of things. And you have guys who are proven big leaguers who are struggling. you know as an organization, you want to give them an opportunity to right the ship before cutting them loose, because you want to make sure that other players know that if they sign with you, you're not going to just cut bait on them and trash them the first time the waters get rough. You're going to give them an opportunity to right the ship.
Yep.
And so I think that oftentimes we lose track of that as fans, that, John Mozeliak, Walt Jocketty, they're going out, they're talking to agents, they're negotiating with guys. When they make that contract, they're making a promise to one another. And yeah, it's a guaranteed contract. The player will get their money even if they don't play all the years for that team. Sure, that's true. Um, but you're also making a commitment to that guy that we want you to play for us for these number of years. And, if things are looking rough, the odds are this is the end of your career, right? Like, and so, but I also think that Mosaic has done a good job of being a good communicator with players in these situations and finding landing places for them. Uh, Jim Edmonds, very early in his tenure, he did that for Jim Edmonds. He did
Right.
that for Scott Rowland,
Right.
where it wasn't going their playing time arrangements weren't going to be what they wanted, and he was able to find them landing spots. Um, and he more recently we just talked about some of the players that he's done that for. But he has also allowed other players to stay. And I know folks talk about Matt Carpenter. Well, Matt Carpenter is going to be a Cardinals Hall of Famer and deservedly so. And I understand. And he also had no trade clause. And, if Matt Carpenter doesn't want to leave and you can't trade him, are you going to just DFA him? And then, of course, by the way, he leaves and goes and hits really well for the Yankees. So,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
so there's always that chance too. And and with Miles Michaelis, no one wants him gone more than me. But this is a case where I think it's totally defensible, and I think they very clearly told him you're on a short leash and you need to listen to us, because he's doing things slightly different this year. He doesn't have a game that allows him to do a lot of things different, and it's been better than the last 2 years. And so I don't want to watch him. I don't want to listen to him. I don't want to see him. Same as all of you. Okay. But if you're looking at on the field performance, like, it's fine. It's not ideal, but like, considering the overall situation, it's fine.
One,
Like,
one day you will all miss being able to use the Turd Ferguson meme.
yes, when you won't have Miles Michaelis to kick around anymore, just like Dick Nixon, and you'll miss it. Um, but so like, if you did, I think if we did do a more go through and really plot it out, I think that the number of times that you're able to trade a player at the peak of their value is pretty small. Um, and Jocketty uh, had some very good trades in that vein. But I would also say that Placido Polanco was an excellent player after he left the St. Louis Cardinals, who had a very long career.
Yeah, because
Like,
he played for both the Phillies and the Tigers, didn't he?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and he was an excellent player. And the other thing is, like, they traded him for Scott Rowland on an expiring contract. Now they were able to negotiate an extension, but there are all these things where it's a little bit more nuanced, and the way that things worked back then were different, where that kind of trade and sign was a common thing. And now it's not. Like, if a guy gets traded at the trade deadline before they become a free agent, it's because they want to be a free agent. And it's just things are a lot different. So it's comparing apples to oranges, and it gets a little tricky.
It's a good answer. And like you said, we could probably go through this. Like that could be an off-season project for Cardinals Off Day to create this master matrix of, all the moves that Jocketty and Mozeliak have made over the years.
That would be a fun project. We could crowdsource it, because I don't know if I have that much free time, even in the cold days of winter, to do that research nowadays.
Well, I don't get to say this very often because I'm not on the pod very often, but thank you all for your questions and for interacting with me. That's who you're most likely interacting with. And I think this is about the time in the show where Ben Godar asks you, what will you be looking for, Ben?
I'm going to be looking for reliever usage, because I think the bullpen's going to have a lot fewer veterans on it come August 1st. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Oliver Marmol manages the bullpen once he no longer has his best relievers in it. Um, and who is able to climb to the top and position himself as a part of the bullpen plan moving into 2026. And that tryout's going to be about 2 months long, and it's going to start on August 1st. And it'll be pretty interesting to watch it, I think. What about you, Dan? What are you going to be watching?
Well, I I'll be honest, I still really like Jordan Walker. I know I'm kind of similar to Godar in this, in that I want to see him do well. Like I just want him to like unlock something and figure it out, because there's so much like raw talent and power. And so I noticed that our one of our friend of the pod, John LaRue on Blue Sky, had a good thread the other day. He used some of Dane Perry's stat work on Walker since he returned after the All-Star break, and his numbers have like just slowly crept up, and he's like made some slight adjustments at the plate. Yes, he still swings at those outside pitches, maybe, but maybe just not quite as often. Um, or maybe he doesn't ground out every time. So I'm kind of hoping to see with the August and September at bats that maybe there's still some progress to be made. Um, call me a call me a hopeless optimist, but kind of hoping that we still haven't quite seen the best of Jordan Walker yet. So,
I hope you're right. I
you know,
think we're all pulling for him. He seems like a good guy. Um, and it's very hard to hit major league pitching. And hopefully, the changes in the Cardinals organization can help him unlock that potential at the major league level. Fingers crossed. Um, Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode. Thank you, Dan, for filling in as co-host.
absolutely.
Thank
I can't
you.
I can't fill Ben Godar's shoes, but I can be here while he's on assignment in Chicago. So,
Thank you, Devont, for our music. And go Cardinals. Make some more trades. And if anything really exciting happens, we might have to do an emergency pod. Ben, it will still be out of town, so it would be Dan and me jumping back on. So we'll make a determination on that front once the trade deadline passes and the smoke clears and we're able to see who the Cardinals have traded. So thanks again, everyone, for listening. Enjoy the final hours of the trade deadline and go Cardinals.
thanks everybody.